How many of you have been contacted about some fatalities that may or may not have occurred down at Child Protective Services? There's been quite a bit of publicity about it, and in making inquiries, it's been very frustrating for me because we can't even acknowledge that it did happen. If people were participating in the system, we are so bound by state law as far as what we can say or can't say that we're interviewed and we have to say, well, if it anyway, we can't really respond. But I've seen the TV reports, I've read newspaper articles, and truthfully, that does raise questions that I think deserve answers. Now, again, I'm not saying casting dispersions. I'm not saying that something inappropriate has happened, but the fact is, I have been unable to verify what it did or didn't happen, and I really can't talk about it because we're bound by this confidentiality. So my thought was, and this is just a thought, but because of me and I can't really discuss it with anybody, was to create a blue ribbon panel where we could put somebody like Barbara Buckley in charge and put some other people that are knowledgeable in the area to go investigate, then report back and say, we've looked at this thing and there's no problem there, or if there's a problem, discuss it. I mean, transparency is important, and this is a huge agency, 1,000 employees, tens of thousands of kids involved. But I normally in the legislature we would sit in the back room and talk about this and decide what to do. Because we can't do that here, I throw it out for suggestions or comments, and maybe it's a bad idea.
I have a few comments myself, but I'm going to go to Mr. Schiller first because you oversee that department.
Commissioners, so in the interest of this item, as you know, DFS is charged statutorily under 432B with investigating and protecting children. Specific to the fatality issue, we have about 3 levels of oversight that currently exist. So at the state level, we have an executive death review committee. We have the Legislative Counsel Bureau, which reviews all of those and gives a report in the biennium. And then we also have DHHS and DCFS that also do a review and have to report out on those. Secondary to that, there's also the Clark County or the more local level oversight. So underneath the executive committee, you have a child death review team, you have the Southern Nevada Child Fatality Task Force, and then you have our serious physical abuse and neglect team. All those are made up of a multidisciplinary task force and or membership for review of those fatalities, all towards continuous improvement. In addition to that, we also have our own internal quality improvement unit, external consultant reviews, and then obviously, as you guys hear from time to time, we have litigation, all of this towards continuous improvement. I want to make sure in the context of this item, from the perspective of investigation of abuse, neglect, and protection of children, that continuous improvement or that improvement towards constantly doing a better job in terms of our processes and policy review is what is the outcome of those reviews. So the confidentiality under 432B that exists and is defined as what allows for those reviews and for that detail. And I think the other piece that I would essentially want to highlight in those review processes, again, is that that is not an internally made up team. It's statutorily defined through statute and then comes down through that executive committee.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Well, I'll just offer some things. Commissioner Sager-Bloom, I met with both sides, the DA and the support our employees for that matter. And, it was a pleasure to meet with them because we talked about some real policy issues where we could make changes. We talked about some things that were, that could help streamline some of the process in order to advocate on for the children themselves. So I met with them for about 8 months, ladies. I met with them, and we made some huge strides on things that were not in place before, and I think that we're always moving forward to do what's in the best interests of children. So I just don't know what I did realize meeting with the employees is that they have a lot of meetings to go to, as you said, Kevin, to oversight many of the obstacles that are out there and to have a review panel, to have all of that. And at least from my conversations from both the DA and the employees, there's been significant improvements, which in this particular conversation is improving all the time around the country. So we're not unique to anybody else. So I personally don't know if we need another panel in the state. I voted for the panel that overseen them, where we get the reports on a regular basis. So maybe we could just have a legislator come and update us on how Clark County is faring overall with keeping the confidentiality of these types of cases, is my thought. Anybody else have any thoughts? Commissioner Weekly and then Commissioner Gibson.
Okay, I just wanted to ask Commissioner Shaker-Bloom, just give me a better understanding in terms of this Blue Ribbon Panel Committee. What would you expect to see from this committee? And I say that respectfully, only because, Director Tim Burge and his team are extremely responsible, and I'm not sure how often you meet with. Do you meet with them regularly?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, that's a start. Okay. All right. I think to be able to meet with the team, because for all of us up here, and I want to apologize to Vanessa, the reporter from Channel 8. I know she reached out to me as well, and me talking with the team, just trying to find out, because I was through the roof, very upset at the last death of, that I saw on Channel 8. Was very heartbreaking. But I've also been advised that there is just so limited information that could be given to me, and I promise you on my life, all 7 of us up here will go to the mat for DFS and those children that are in care. But my question to you is, and I understand how frustrating it is, when we talk about transparency, but I want to know from you, what is it that you'd like to see coming back to you as it relates to this panel that you're proposing here today?
Essentially, people with credibility who said, we have looked at this thing, we've talked to both sides, we've analyzed it, and there's nothing there. Or we've looked at this and it looks to us like, these changes could be made and whatever. But essentially, I don't think we as a commission have ability to go in there and do the dive into it the way we would
Yes, sir.
need to.
No, I understand that, and you're a lawyer, and so you understand the law much better than I do. I get extremely frustrated as well, because we go back and forth, and Director Birch and his team will tell you, for me, it gets frustrating when we talk about reunification versus removal. Many of us want to see children back with their families and in their homes, but many of us get so upset and concerned when we see children that are placed back into their home, where it becomes a really volatile situation for the child. And so it's almost sometimes a damn if you do, damn if you don't type situation. My question to you from a legal standpoint, and maybe the DA's office can help us, because trust me, I know that I get on the phone and I talk to the DA's office in reference to everything happening with DFS or DJJS on a regular basis. From a legal standpoint, what is it that you believe we are not being told that we should be told? Because I just want to understand where you're going. I appreciate your heart, man, and I know your heart is in the right place in trying to respond, but I don't want to put myself out there to the press. And again, Vanessa is a really nice young lady from Channel 8, but the thing is, I'm limited in terms of what I can say. And so is there something that that I don't know that I'm not responding?
I don't think so. There's nothing. I'm sure you get the calls from employees, you get the question about, well, the district attorney's office is investigating itself, so they're not independent. Attorneys are involved, say this is wrong, you read about the lawsuits. But truthfully, I don't know anything that's improper. I just was frustrated because I can't really say anything. I can't even acknowledge that that these people were in the system or weren't in the system. Our hands are tied, and I just felt that maybe having an independent person say, give it a stamp of approval would be valid. But frankly, the chair just said she's looked at it, she's helped with that, and I haven't been around long enough to have done that kind of legwork.
Commissioner Gibson and then Commissioner Brown.
So I have responded to the interviews, and I know how difficult it is to, well, first off, it's hard to talk about things you really don't know the details about. And in terms of Commissioner Sagerblum's suggestion. I'm not sure whether you get a blue ribbon panel around the confidentiality limitations in any case, but I've decided for myself that there are specifics in statute about confidentiality, both in federal and state law, that relate to personnel matters that might come out of these things and related discipline, and the facts and circumstances surrounding the investigations. And I think what I've finally come to is, until all of that changes, it becomes a matter of, and I think this is really what you're saying, finding people whose judgment you really trust to take a look at it, take another look at it, and make a judgment about whether or not the actions are appropriate and we're doing enough or we've done everything we can, and then relying on that. And so because of these confidentiality limitations we have, I've determined that I want to know who we have running things, who we have in place. And I met with Tim. I've spent a lot of time with Kevin on these issues. And where I've come down is that the people that are in place today have made the decision in terms of their professional careers that they're willing to and are committed to doing everything they can possibly do for the benefit of the children. And I don't know that there are other people that I could recommend that this be run by that would be better at that than these people, because I have confidence in them. I've come to the conclusion that I trust that we're doing the best we can do. There are some things that we don't have, we really don't have, and our agencies don't have the control over. For instance, the reunification decisions become the subject of a court order, and I think in those cases, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, from the discussions we've had, but a judge actually hears those items and can both sustain the decision that has been made or the recommendation that has been made by the staff for reunifying or not, or overturn it. And the judge can substitute his or her own judgment about that decision. There's nothing we can do about that. And as I understand what I've seen on television, because I really don't know any more than what any of us have seen in the media, there may well have been cases where there are issues after a judge has exercised his or her own discretion about what should happen. That's all real frustrating, but I think what it comes down to is, are there people that are involved in these reviews that we already have in place whom we trust? And my view would be, if we don't have those people there, then we need to make changes in the county so that the people that we have in those positions are people whose judgment we trust. And so that's what I've come down to. I don't know, I would love to be able to get a completely different, unrelated set of eyes on it, but I don't know how you do that given the confidentiality limitations that exist. And it is very difficult to respond to the questions that have been put to me. I believe the answers that I've given. For instance, I don't believe that an investigation is actually conducted. Yes, there are internal investigations that happen, but when there's a prosecution, the investigating agency is the police department. It is not the district attorney's office. It's not just the county department, but the police department comes in and does its investigation. That agency is independent from the DA and the agency. They don't represent the agency. And in the case of the district attorney's office, there's been a wall there forever where the civil side of the DA's office represents the agencies of the county. They are our lawyers. And the district attorney's office criminal division is the side that operates independently. And in fact, there are times when there are some conflicts. I don't mean conflicts in the case of legal conflicts, but kind of conflict like you have in an office over things. But the DA's office has done a great job historically in being independent and conducting criminal prosecutions. They take the investigation that is packaged by the police department and conduct a prosecution based on that evidence. So it is the hardest interview you can ever do. Frankly, Vanessa probably knows a whole lot more about any of this than I'll ever know. And she asks the really penetrating questions. But it comes down to, am I confident? Do I have confidence in the people that are doing the work day in and day out? And if there are mistakes or if there is misconduct, do I trust that the people that supervise those agencies will get to the bottom of it and take every single action required in order to respond? And that may mean sometimes disciplining people to what end, I don't know, to the end that is indicated. It may mean simply putting a stamp of approval on the actions that have been taken, not the outcome, but the actions that have been taken by the agency. So that's kind of how I see it, and I concur with all those who've been interviewed and who've had to answer those hard questions. It's a tough interview.
Thank you, Commissioner Gibson. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Likewise, had a chance to get some background information, and what struck me immediately is the volume of children that come into this system. It's not like the county wanted to create a system where we go out and help the kids that need help. We are the safety net. The Clark County Social Services is the safety net. They don't ask for these cases, but these cases are a reality of life and in our community. And last year alone, I think the number is over 32,000 children, either through the foster care or CPS, have come through our system. Now, at the end of the day, are there tragedies? Absolutely. That's the human side of things. But what I came away from this whole dialogue the last few weeks is day in and day out, we have hundreds of employees in Clark County, the men and women that have dedicated their careers to helping these children in need. And that's the story. We have some heroes downstairs that truly are doing the right thing for all the right reasons. And are there errors? Are there mistakes made? Absolutely. But that's life. What we have in place, I think, Kevin, you indicated 3 levels of oversight. And that's a state mandatory. They created that process. I think from the oversight, we have everything in place to keep an eye on the county protocols to make sure we're doing everything or doing the best we can under these situations. So I certainly respect the fact that there's a story at the end when any child dies. But let's not lose sight of the fact that on the front end, there are scores of county employees, men and women, dedicating each and every day to saving children. And I think that's the important thing to me. I think a creation of another oversight would just be redundant, and they'd probably be under the same restrictions as the current oversight group. So I do not support creation.
Okay, anybody else? Kevin, you have any other thoughts?
I just wanted to point out, Commissioners, 2 things. The local oversight that state directed, that multidisciplinary team process, as I emphasized, is key towards those reviews. There are members here in the audience if you wanted to ask them some questions. And then I wanted to echo, I think, what all the commissioners have said. Our staff, we have a dedicated staff that have a very difficult job. And I want to make sure I recognize the fact that they work very hard in that protection of children. And when things like this, when a review comes up and there's issues there, they are very inundated in that process, much like you would see in any public safety environment. And that process is very detailed and in fact works towards, as Commissioner Brown has indicated, towards that constant review of next steps, policy, and really being the safety net in terms of both two pieces. One, the investigation of child abuse and neglect and the protection of children, and then there's also the children that enter our system where we're reunifying. And the other piece that I failed to mention is that check and balance from kind of a federal level all the way down through the state and local level. We have federal compliance, which is a very significant piece of what we do.
So Commissioner Sager-Blum,
Details of the case and publish out a report for us. That report does roll up to the state of Nevada, where if there are gaps or trends, that information is issued back down to us with mandates that we correct said gaps or trends in a timely manner, and we respond to that. So I wanted to definitely introduce Ms. Phoebus, thank her for her hard work, and let her answer any questions or make a comment if she.
good afternoon.
Hi. So I can just let you know, so we do organize the Clark County Child Fatality Review Team. The focus and purpose of those reviews is a multidisciplinary review of all child deaths that occur within our jurisdiction. So we are focused on injury prevention in general, as well as identifying trends in other forms of child fatalities as well. So we don't just focus on child welfare involved cases, but it's broader than that in terms of the scope and purpose of that review team.
Does anybody have any questions? Commissioner Sager-Blum, you want to ask her?
So, I apologize, but just, so without going into details, which we can't talk about, have you looked at deaths in the Child Protective Services area? And are you telling us that, based upon your analysis, everything looks good? As far as...
Yeah, so the team does review all child deaths. We have representatives from the Clark County Department of Family Services that share that detailed information. All the members of the team are bound by confidentiality that is allowed to the team under statute. The team can request records from any and all agencies and organizations that may have had interaction with the child and the family, and we do take a look at those cases. As Tim mentioned, the recommendations that come out of the local fatality review team do roll up to the state level executive committee that reviews those recommendations for action. In addition to that, sometimes as part of that process, it's not as formal as making a formal recommendation that goes statewide, but folks can go back to their agency and make adjustments focused on injury prevention. And so I don't know the details of cases that you're talking about. So I don't necessarily want to make a specific comment on any individual cases or anything there, but I do know that our information does go into the statewide report, as well as local reports that look at de-identified data. So we're looking at counts and percentages. I can say historically the number of child deaths that their death was related to child abuse or neglect is a small portion of the number of deaths that are reviewed within those review teams.
So I'm going to jump in here. So I know that when I started meeting with both sides, I asked hard questions myself, and a lot of it came from my very first interview with Vanessa, and then I went back and started investing in the time. And so like one of the questions I asked is how do we prioritize the, level 1, level 2, level 3, because I was trying to understand how that process works. And so what I learned through the process is there are some federal guidelines that we look at, and then there's our system where we ask certain questions which helps move the case up or down. So I'm probably not saying it near as eloquently as I learned it, but we also have a variety of policies in place so that the person on the other end of the phone is following. So, Commissioner Sager-Blum, what I would offer to you is we have both on the DA side and both on the employee side, and we honestly even brought in the judges so that we could have the conversation on things that they might see, things that would be better, less records, more records. And I would implore you to kind of dig into it, because then you'll understand how we get to those different levels. And for me, I thought, how do you ask a child that can't speak for themselves because they're much smaller or they don't have any communication skills? And we actually have some pretty amazing ways of how we do that. So maybe, Tim, you could just microly dig into that a little bit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so we do receive, last year we received over 20,000 phone calls reporting concerns around young people in our community. Of those 20,000 calls, 11,000 turned into investigations because there was information that was able to be gleaned from that report by our hotline intake workers that operate much like a 911 system, that there is a credible threat to a child, there's impending danger or present danger, and then we go out and need to investigate that. And we go on and investigate that. Those can translate either to in-home safety services, which is something we've been doing over the last 5 years as part of a federal waiver to keep children in home with their parents rather than just removing, and we did keep over 2,000 children safely at home with their parents with these additional wraps and supports, of which we'll be standing even more up in the coming years thanks to some new federal legislation. Of those 4,000 that then move into removals and those children come into foster care, we look to see how quickly we can properly and safely reunite them with their family while working with the court, the children's attorneys, our attorneys, the advocates, court-appointed special advocates, the whole child welfare system, because this is a large system, which is why you hear us talking about larger looks at child deaths and what are preventable. We had 69 children that passed away last year. 16 of those had come to our attention at some time in the family's life prior. But of those other 69, safe sleep, and sadly over this last Labor Day weekend, several families experienced the tragedy of losing their children to pool safety issues, an issue we continue to battle in this community. So it's a large, very sensitive subject. It's very complex and something I'm happy to walk through with any of the commissioners. It does take more than one tutorial session, as the chairwoman indicated, but we will be as transparent as we can with any of our elected officials and be able to answer under 432B all that we can. But just know that, as indicated, we do stand here and represent over 900 employees. They get up every day and go out and do their best to keep over 32,000 children safe this last year. And they're doing it again today, and they'll do it again tomorrow. And we'll keep making that system better for them. We'll keep arguing for and fighting for the resources and tools they need to do that job more effectively. And we'll keep listening to them. And because of their voices and the interaction with some of the commissioners here on this board, we've made over 18 policy changes in the last 18 months because we've been listening. And we'll keep listening, and we'll keep doing better, and we'll keep listening to the reports, and we'll keep working with the state and all of our partners to make sure that every child in our community is safe, because any child fatality, it's a tragedy, and one that we hope to avoid. But if and when we can't, we work with our law enforcement partners to hold accountable the perpetrator of that crime, the parent or the caregiver who caused harm to that child. We work very actively to make sure that those crimes are paid for.
Does anybody else have anything? Commissioner Sagerblum?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think based on the conversation, obviously, people beyond me have looked at this a lot closer and feel comfortable with it. And so I'm willing to withdraw, or it was really basically just a discussion. So I appreciate the fact that you engaged in it and told me what's going on. And I think at this point, this is as good as we're going to get. So thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Wakely. Well, no, it's good to have the conversation. I know for me, I was able to work up close along with our workers and even Metro. And, if all of us as a community can start paying attention and you see something, you say something right away, we need to get back to that for anyone, especially our little ones. Okay? Thank you.